IVM.
Hi, I'm Rohan Joshi, and on my podcast, the show about crypto, I've been having some pretty cool conversations with industry experts about what exactly cryptocurrency is and what makes it so exciting. If you haven't already, please check it out on the IVM Podcasts Network. Now, a quick shout out to my fellow crypto heads. We've got a listener survey going on, which will take not more than 10 minutes of your time to fill out. So please check the link in the description and help me out by filling it up. Don't forget to tune into a show about crypto on the IVM app and wherever you get your podcasts from.
Hello and welcome to the Wire Talks. I'm Sidharth Bhatia. On February the 18th, 1946, Indian ratings in the then British Indian Navy mutinied against the general conditions such as food, etc. It began initially in Bombay with 150 naval men participating in it, but soon spread to other bases and eventually over 20,000 people from all over the country joined in. They now began to talk also about India's freedom, about the racism that their British superiors showed, and they in turn showed disrespect to their British officers. Except for the Communist Party, no other parties supported the mutiny. This story has disappeared from our history books, but now one author has delved deep into it. It's a beautiful looking book by Pramod Kapoor, and I have seen an advanced text and with a wonderful cover by Chitto Prasad. Kapoor has earlier produced a handsome book on Gandhi, so let's hear about the mutiny of the Indian Naval Ratings in 1946 from him. Welcome to the Wire Talks, Pramod.
Thank you, Sidharth.
So tell us, why did you think about writing on this subject, which is really speaking quite obscure, isn't it?
You see, while I was researching my biography of Mahatma Gandhi, I came across several statements made by Gandhiji and Sardar Patel in relating to the mutiny. I did not pay as much attention I should have paid at that time, and it was omitted. It was not included, not omitted, but it was not included in the Gandhi biography. But I was all the same very intrigued that such a big, that a mutiny of this large scale took place, and there is no mention in the formal history books. So I started to reread portions in volume 88, 89 of the Mahatma Gandhi's collected works. And then later I got a book by the main protagonist, B.C. Dutt, who had actually started with a few other people who started the mutiny. He had written a wonderful book called Mutiny of the Innocent, which was, I later learned, was ghostwritten by my friend and our friend, Shyam Benegal. So I contacted Shyam Benegal, and he whatever he could remember a lot. And he told me about B.C. Dutt and what all he had told him, etc. Now, having revisited, I felt there was a bit of guilt that something as important as this, which was written out by the politicians of the time because it didn't suit them. I thought a full book is needed on this subject. More I read newspapers of the time. A lot of newspapers were actually missing from the archives, Indian archives. Free Press Journal, which was at the forefront, which was really, supporting the ratings. Even their office didn't have their newspaper issues of 8 February 18 through 8 February 26. No archive in India had it, and it was to that extent it was it was rubbed off, it was erased off, and so of course I found them later in the National Maritime Museum in London. So that's how I started. That's how I started to read more, and more I read, more I was convinced that a complete book, this is a very important part of our history, which has been edited out and needs to be written. I took my own time. It took about 5-6 years to um, to study the subject. Also, there was, of course, the several other factors that came in. But in the end, even now, I feel that I should have researched first. Further, I would have got some more. But then, I had to stop somewhere. And there it is. The book is here now.
So you found some book, found some initial papers. That's hardly enough, as you know, to write an entire book. But then you read a paragraph and then you wonder something, and then it leads you to tracking down the relatives of the people that were participating in the Navy. How did you track them down? You know that Indian newspapers, Indians in general too, are notoriously lax about archives. Tell me, when they were fighting for Indian freedom, why did these ratings get so little political support? So, this is the beginning you have explained. What about going further?
Yes, you see, it all started, as I said, with Mutiny of the Innocent by B.C. Dutt. But you see, that book was written as a memoir, as an autobiography. So obviously, he had not included many people who had equally participated or started the mutiny. So I first thing I read all the newspapers of the time. Some newspapers, the newspapers were divided. Times of India, Statesman, etc. were British papers. I mean, British-owned papers. Then we had Bombay Chronicle and Free Press Journal and National Herald and the Bombay Standard, Sunday Standard, etc. They were nationalist papers. So I read both sides of the reportage of between 18 and 26. But beyond that, I think the entire story changed because the Britishers and the Indian politicians wanted to project it as a mutiny against the bad food and bad behavior of the British towards Indian sailors, etc. They wanted at any cost not to erase off that there was a political side to it, and that there was a huge racial discrimination because of which all this was happening, and especially the role played by INA and Subhash Chandra Bose. Because the society around these sailors, the family, the friends, used to say, "You guys work for Britishers. Look at these guys. They have these were the soldiers also, and they rebelled, and they are doing so much service to the nation. And you people are drawing salary." So there was some sort of they felt small. They felt insulted. So there was a big, that was a major reason why they revolted, and they revolted so quickly. But let me tell you, if you talk only about, let me go beyond research and tell you that this mutiny, though it started on the 18th of February, actually had started few months earlier. And I think after Aruna Asaf Ali came out of Quit India, surfaced after, because gone underground into the India movement. When she surfaced, I think there is circumstantial evidence to say that she and her leftist-leaning Congress people, they all got together and started to plan some sort of a mutiny, which was something between what Subhash Chandra Bose was doing and what Gandhiji was doing, and that is how they met these ratings and in a flat in Bombay, which is I've written in the book. The flat still exists, the building still exists, the Rivera building on Marine Drive, and it was flat number 2 where they all met, and this is where they used to talk to these ratings, at least the leaders. All this actually and much more came out when a friend from Bombay, Professor Dilip Rao, who I suppose you also know, he came up with, he and one of his colleagues, Shekhar Krishna, came up with some documents in this. I don't know whether they realized what they were holding. And that changed the entire the research. That it threw up names of people, other people who had actually helped BC Dutt or worked together with BC Dutt to write all those so seditious slogans on the walls of a shore establishment and insulted the British officers, etc. So all that changed, and that then led me to talk to or try and find who the descendants were. But I mean, my big regret is that if I had started this book 10 or 15 years ago, a whole lot of these people who had actually revolted were all alive. They all died from, let's say, 2003-4 to between 2003-4 to 2018. And so my next bet was to try and locate their relatives, their descendants. I was lucky in some cases, and in some cases, I just couldn't find those people, especially in Pakistan. But Madan Singh, who was the vice president of the strike committee, I found his, I've written all that and that how I could reach the daughter, and daughter then put me in contact with the brothers who all live in America and Spain and so on. Then, of course, BC Dutt's, I was fortunate to meet BC Dutt's wife, who was a well-known family lawyer in Bombay, called Anusuya Dutt. She was practicing as late as when she was 89 or 88. I met her just about a year before she passed away, and spoke with BC Dutt's son. And similarly, in Pakistan, I could, through my own friends and connection, I was relentlessly pursuing it. And most of the time, it came as a big reward that I could contact all these people. There are some amazing facts that came out of my contact with these people. I checked with newspapers and other documents. So that was the descendants bit and the relatives bit. But there was also, you have to give it to British that they kept their record very well. I mean, there was no tampering with the record. Unlike in India, as you said, that the whole lot of newspapers were altogether missing of that period. They kept their record well. And as we all know, that the British keep their court proceedings very properly. There's no tampering with them. Commission of inquiry that was held after the mutiny happened was faithfully recorded, and I could get hold of material from there and various biographies of the people who were involved, etc. So it's a long process, but in the end, despite having found most of it, there is little regret. There was a person who was the president of the strike committee. It's a very interesting story that his name was Muhammad Shuaib Khan. He was known as Punnu Khan or MS Khan. I tried my best. I put all my resources, my friends' resources, in Pakistan to reach him, but no, I just could not find him. But there was, I was then led to chief of staff in Pakistan who had just passed away. His initials were also MS Khan. There are some people who are on record to say he's the same MS Khan, but when I spoke to his daughter, she said no, they were two different MS Khan. So that is the biggest mystery and the regret I have, that I have still not found MS Khan, which I hope to do soon. So that's in short, my journey in researching the book.
So Pramod, that was a fascinating story. You've given this side, but why were the Congress and the Muslim leagues, given that these ratings were fighting for India's freedom, why was political support so difficult to get?
See, having had interest in politics from a long time, I can say the politicians haven't changed. They were what they were. They made promises which they knew they will not be able to keep. But coming to your question, I think the main reason was that they saw the independence was imminent. that it was coming, and they did not want to rock the boat, so to say, by helping not in violent means, etc. That was and by that time, which was just about 18 months before the actual independence, and I firmly believe that the naval mutiny hastened the independence. I mean, sorry to go back again, but one day after the mutiny started, the cabinet mission was announced, and cabinet mission included the top person on the Navy, which was very intriguing. But what I would say, that main reason was that Gandhiji, of course, took the stand that I cannot support anything which is not peaceful and non-violent. Now, that was his stand, but he put Sardar Patel and he put all the rightist elements in the Congress to persuade these ratings to surrender. And I, as I said, the main reason, both for Jinnah as well as for Sardar Patel, was that the independence was imminent. That they were by that time started to speculate on what portfolio who will get to that extent, and they could not afford to rock the boat. And I think that is, I mean, there were several other reasons, but this is what I would say in short.
No, one kind of sees the hesitation on the part of the political class, but there is little doubt that independence was hastened. It wasn't supposed to be August 15, 1947. And Sardar Patel gave some assurances which were not fulfilled. These people were left high and dry. Firstly, what were those assurances and what happened to these people afterwards, after independence especially?
See, one thing I should have mentioned, that even the Congress was divided. The young ginger group, you can call them, or the leftists within the Congress were all for supporting these ratings. So you had Aruna Asaf Ali, you had Jayaprakash Narayan, you had Achyut Patwardhan. All these people who were leftists were all for supporting these ratings, and all the senior leaders. And in fact, Nehruji was neither here nor there. I mean, he would say one day in public that he would support the rating that they, but I think there was some pressure put on him from the top. Then he would change his statement next day. But even Nehruji was in support of these ratings, and more often than not, that he spoke in favor of them. Now, Sardar Patel was, I think, given the task by. There was only one high command at that time, and no one would. I mean, it was not apparent, but everyone knew that the very benign dictator in Congress was Mahatma Gandhi. And if Mahatma Gandhi didn't want something to happen, the Congress would never do it. So he was, I think, Sardar Patel was his representative. He made them surrender by saying that I will make sure that there is no victimization, that there will be no mass trial, etc. And the ratings in their all sanity had surrendered. Even, let's say, if they had gone ahead by 1 or 2 days, probably it would have been disastrous for both sides. But they surrendered on the assurance given by Sardar Patel, and same with Jinnah. And in independent Pakistan, none of them were taken back. And so was it in India. None of them were. Even 10 years after the independence, when some of them approached Mr. Nehru and Krishna Menon, they were given something like a cyclo-style reply that the government has taken a decision not to reinstate those who participated in the mutiny, and those who were dismissed with disgrace will not even be eligible to apply for civil posts in the government. Now, this is by the independent government, not by the British government. There are many conjectures. They were in India. They had the chief of naval staff. First four chief of naval staff were British until 1958. I think they were all British. Perhaps that was one of the reasons that they could not reinstate them. I don't know. I cannot say for full authority. But none of them, they were left on the street. And some of them really died, as paupers. Some of them who were brilliant even went to the extent of heading an airline like Ghana Airline. Madan Singh headed the Kalinga Airways. He started with Biju Patnaik, and B.C. Dutt became very successful. First a journalist, then he was disillusioned with journalism. He went to Lintas, and from Lintas he joined the Yusuf Meher Ali Center in Panvel, and that's where he passed away. So there were some bright spots, but there were most of them. In fact, one rating, Vishwanath Bose even went to the extent of writing to Nehru that, look, you were a political street fighter. We fought for the country too. You have become prime minister, and look at where we are. That letter I've reproduced in the book in total. But they were really left on the road to fend for themselves, unfortunately.
So this is a very sorry saga, very sorry episode in India's politics in general, but also in India's freedom movement. I am not an expert the way you are, but there is evidence that the British panicked and immediately saw the implications of this mutiny. And internal notes were moving around about saying that this would have serious consequences over British rule. Is that correct?
Absolutely. On day one, when the news reached them in the evening of 18th, the panic set in. They were petrified that this could be a repeat of 1857. And unlike 1857, when the people were not so aware and were not so much with the people who revolted, in this case, the entire most of India was with those people who had mutinied. So they really panicked. There were several discussions in House of Commons, House of Lords. There was the one of the biggest warship, which was in Trincomalee, was asked to sail rapidly to Bombay to quell them, to crush the mutiny. There were sorties by the Royal Air Force right above the dockyard to scare them. There was, cables flying between Westminster and Viceroy's office, accusing each other. The Prime Minister writing that you are not taking my question seriously, you're not reporting seriously. These kind of cables were flying. They were absolutely petrified because they thought that if the defense forces revolt, they will be in big trouble, and with just 7,000 of British soldiers, they will not be able to handle it, and there could be a big massacre of Britishers. And that is how they went about. And it was, from what is very apparent, it was the political class. If they had not given the support to the Britishers, the Britishers would have panicked further. And I don't know what of course, they were ready to. They did fire in, what is now your INS Angre, the Lion Gate area, etc. But the ratings, the young ratings, were also prepared. They had captured 78 ships around Bombay and taken control of 21 shore establishments, like, as I said, INS Angre, what was called Akbar at that time, in Thane, etc. And they had trained their big guns on to Gateway of India and on Yacht Club, and said that, look, if you do not withdraw these threats of low sorties, etc., we'll blow up these buildings. Of course, they were all the time talking among themselves that this will damage this will hurt the Indians as well. This could be dangerous to citizens of Bombay, and also those who ratings who were inside these establishments. They probably would not have done this, but they were ready with this kind of threat. So there was a complete panic in the British establishment at the time.
We'll be right back after this short break.
wonder why China does the things that it does, or want to know how we could improve online privacy, or perhaps you're thinking about how we can kickstart India's economy. If you'd like to search for the answers to such questions, check out All Things Policy, a daily public policy podcast that covers everything from employment figures to aircraft carriers. Tune in from Monday to Friday for new episodes and fresh takes.
Welcome back to the Wire Talks. All over India, the Indian population was with these sailors, but the political establishment was not. What gave them the strength? What gave them the kind of energy? Was it self-propelled, or was it that they felt that they had a genuine cause? Were they just passionate and, I would say, mad? Or were they going about it scientifically with a tactical as well as strategic plan? What was the end? They knew, obviously, that the British would not give in. What was their eventual goal?
Well, there was a bit. It was a bit audacity on their part to have gone into this, but then they were fighting. They were charged with the freedom fervor. They were. It was not just the food and racial discrimination. They were charged, and they like one of the ratings in their speech said that, look, we are taught to fight with the guns. We don't know how to fight with charkha. This is exactly the words he said in his speech. And so they were ready to take on. They took on mightier enemies and sacrificed themselves. I think this is what had got into their head. There was also a peaceful side of the group, which would tell them that, look, it's not going to result into anything. The last night, before they surrendered, the whole night they were shouting, they were crying, they were hugging each other, and as if and there was a complete division of whether they should surrender or they should keep fighting. There were a lot of them said, we are fighters, we are ready to die, we will fight. But what gave them support? There was a time when they would have surrendered at least 12 hours before, but there was a time when the call given by the communists, whether it was correct or not, I'm not going to go into detail of that, but because of the call given by the communists, whole lot of students, the mill workers, and in any case, the people in Bombay were supporting them. There were these Irani restaurant owners, who would make packets and throw on their boats to say, okay, take it for your colleagues and friends. So there was the big support from Bombay citizens, as well as mill workers and transport workers and student unions. I think that gave them life of another 36 hours to fight. And that is what renewed their, if they had support from politics, it would have been a game-changing event. But they knew that in absence of complete support from right wing, you can call them, or from the politicians, they would not be able to sustain. And in the end, the good sense prevailed, and they surrendered. But what kept them going was really the support of the public, who actually came on the street. As many as official figure is 400 in 3 days, but I'm sure there is a front page report by Times of India, which I put in the book, which says 700 casualties in one day. 700, and that was quickly withdrawn, or what happened. And besides that one particular issue, I can't find that issue anywhere else. Even in Times of India, you cannot find that issue. But there was a printed issue with a front page banner headline saying 700 casualties in Bombay alone. Now, that is the kind of support that these boys got from the public, and that kept them going.
No, just clarify, 700 casualties of what?
Of Indians. They were not. The Britishers actually had tanks on the street of Bombay, the armored cars on streets of Bombay. As many in 4 hours, as many as 24 places they were fired. these are people. Of course, there must have been some hooligans also who were looting the Lawrence and Mayo and all those British enterprises and British shops, etc. So there was this plea taken that there is a complete mayhem and that this is the only way to control them. But the British was shooting on the streets of Bombay incessantly with absolutely no control. And that is how that many people were killed. And official figure, as I said, is 400 killed in 3 days and 1,500 injured. But if you look at some of the books written or some of the people who had heard from their parents, they said there was not any space left in any of these hospitals in Bombay to treat the wounded. So it was much bigger than 400. And by mistake or whatever, this one particular issue of Times of India said 700 casualties on that particular day. So that was the extent of mayhem that had taken place on the streets of Bombay, and that also was one of the reasons why the ratings thought that they should call it off. Otherwise, this will go on in all of India. And the army was ready to revolt. In fact, part of the army had revolted in Bombay. Air Force openly had revolted. So if it had gone for another 2-3 days, this would have been an all-India revolt of complete defense forces.
The Indian Navy, even after independence, was run on somewhat the old line. The chief was a British person for many, many years. So we can understand that. But what was the Indian officers thinking? Was there any tacit support from them, but they chose to keep quiet? What about the next 8 or 10 years after independence that they continued in the Navy? Did the naval establishment not think that they should proudly talk about what their sailors did? What was the officer class thinking?
Well, at that time, they must have been in a big dilemma. Here was the country's freedom at one stage, and there is this allegiance to the force you are fighting, with. I mean, you're with, and military ethos says that you have to be first faithful to your force. And it must have been, I'm sure internally they were all debating. And in fact, in some cases, it also came out that in the Commission of Inquiry, they stood up and they did say that this is where our British officers had gone wrong. There were also some very illustrious Navy officers, young officers of the time, who later became admirals and chief of the naval staff, etc., who were even spying for Britishers, but they were doing their job that they were given. And I cannot say, because analyzing it 75 years later and saying this was wrong is also a bigger mistake, because they were actually being faithful to their own force, to the force they were fighting for. And there was in fact not one; there were four subsequent British naval chiefs, Britishers who became the chief of naval staff in India. But I think there was only one officer, Subhani, from Bombay, who actually came out in the open and supported, and he gave himself in. He was in fact taken to the concentration camp. The rest of them were, even if they privately they wanted to support India, they had to be with their regiment and with their force.
There is a memorial to these mutineers in Bombay, in Mumbai, in Colaba, but nobody knows that it exists. If you pass by it and you want to get into the garden, it's locked. It's open only once a year. And I didn't know about this till a few years ago. When was this put up, and why is it not publicized more often?
I think it came in the mid-90s when I'm not 100% sure, because I think that memorial is completely ignored. 90% of the people driving past that memorial don't even know what that memorial is. Only those who are interested know about it. But because it's not been publicized, but I think it was 50 years after the event that this memorial was made. and which is, I think, is fairly insignificant. There should have been much more. The real recognition for, I don't know why or what triggered it, happened last year, and in the 75th year, and then this Republic Day tableau carried the naval thing carried the naval mutiny in the tableau, but otherwise there were two other instances when two trawlers were named after Madan Singh, and I think it was BC that they were called as they were named after Madan Singh, the vice president, and BC Dutt, who was the main hero of the mutiny. But other than that, nothing has been done. I hope they wake up to it now and look at the sacrifice made by these ratings.
While interviewing people, did you get a sense of whether it is taught to or just comes up in any kind of course with the Indian Navy recruits? Is there any sense? Is there memory loss, erasure, deliberate erasure? Did you get a sense of what people in the Navy today think about it, the officer class especially?
If you talk to a serious Navy or a defense or a military person, they will never support a mutiny of any kind. They think it is a gross discipline. A lot of very strong officers feel that this was a discipline. Yet, because it was linked with the freedom movement and the independence of the country, they are somewhat subdued in their criticism. But the fact is that no serious military person likes a mutiny and can support it. The support in this case is only because it is connected with the freedom and independence movement of India. But by and large, from the formal history books, or even most of these Navy people that I met had not even heard about the naval mutiny. They didn't know that a mutiny had taken place. Only the officers who retired long ago had knew about it. But the current officers didn't even know that there was any mutiny and that's of this serious nature that had taken place.
Is it your hope, now that you have gone into it, that it's taught in the schools, etc.? Because you know that history books are being altered. Do you think that should be done? And secondly, do you think it will be done? Is there any kind of hope you have?
Yes, I think it should be done. I would be surprised that after reading so much that had happened at that time, how Britishers were shaken up, how the political class was shaken up at the time, that they will lose their power if this was not crushed and so on. I'm sure this was a very, very, the present regime should realize that this is a very serious business. This was a very serious business, and that it did change the course of, it did hasten the independence. And I think the historians too will help in this case. But then, things are slightly different. Even the historians are divided and so on. So I can't talk about the political part of it, but looking at the seriousness and the gravity of the event, this has to be included in the curriculum of freedom movement.
So, Pramod, that's a noble thought that it should be a part of history books, etc. At some level, and I know that no government, no defense ministry, no armed services establishment would want to popularize the very notion of a mutiny, and then make sure that it reaches every schoolboy, every schoolgirl, every college student. Nobody would want that. Or do you think, despite the political implications, this government will be quick to latch on to it? Something that the Congress had not done?
Well, truly, this is one of the reasons given by the politicians of the time, that after all, we will have a navy in the independent India also to run, and we have to run them with discipline. Now, all that is fine, but this particular mutiny should not be taken as a mutiny by the armed forces. It should be taken as a freedom movement. The result was a hastening of the independence, and it should not be taken. It was a different circumstances. It was very unusual circumstances. It was not a Potemkin mutiny in Russia that it happened on the ship because of food. It happened because these youngsters wanted to actually give the Royal Indian Navy to the independent India as an Indian Navy, as a navy owned by Indians and of Indians by Indians. This is what they wanted to do. So it should be actually taken as an independence movement, a freedom movement, rather than a pure mutiny. The other reason I have a feeling that they don't want the armed force, the naval forces may not want this to, naval officers may not want this to come out, is because their role of their those who have been the chief of naval staff in the last 20, 30 years, their role will be interpreted at this time, rightly or wrongly, in a different way, when they were actually spying for the British and telling them this particular sailor is doing this. This is what he's writing. This is what he's doing. I mean, they were supporting the British at that time. So, because they were supporting the force they were loyal to. But it will be interpreted very differently at this time when people back and say that these were traitors. And so a whole lot of people in the naval force would not want it to come out in full. Although it is absolutely wrong to analyze something that happened 75 years ago in today's scenario. But this is what it is. This is how it will be perceived. So there are reasons that they wouldn't want it to glorify this. But the fact is that it should be taken as a part of the freedom movement and not as a part of the mutiny done by the armed forces on its own.
Yes, well, we live on hope, but I think it's really important for future generations to at least know the bigger story of India's independence. And as history books are being changed, it can't be just political. It has to also be authentic and detailed. Not for me to tell you as a publisher what to do, but Pramod, maybe you can produce cheap, mass-produced books to reach the people and make sure that more and more people read about it. So ultimately, you did mention that one of your hopes was that it gets into school books. But don't you generally want it restored to its rightful place?
Yes, I would very much want to. But the adage, the old saying that the history is not only written by the ruler, but also perpetuated by the subsequent rulers. So no matter how much I try, it will probably remain in a book and in my loud shouts and social media. But if it has to take a serious position in history, it is the rulers who actually write and propagate it or perpetuate it. So really, that's the truth. We will, of course, having worked so hard on it, I will, and I believe in it. So I will try and do as much as possible. But the truth is that it has to be accepted by everybody.
Not that it should bother you, but you're not going to make too many friends with this book because certainly the Navy will be somewhat annoyed, and maybe the ruling classes also. And what happened 75 years ago, we are notoriously lax in understanding our past. So I just hope that you have taken, maybe I'm exaggerating, but you have taken these things into account, that telling the truth via fact sometimes can be a little, can have other unintended consequences.
Yes, but you have to be truthful to what you're doing. I mean, there were a lot of things in the book that I didn't. I mean, I'm not a communist. I haven't supported communism for a long, long time, except when I was a student, and it was more of a romance rather than a thinking or a philosophy. But in this book, all out support to these communists, despite not agreeing with them for in most of my adult life. So, but that is the truth, that they were the ones who actually fought for them. So I have just put forward what the truth is, and I sometimes feel that I'm better at storytelling than analyzing it. So I just present the story as it came to me, and then readers do their own analysis of. I'm sure there will be a lot of congressmen who. I have written as late as 1965 how they tried to kill a play that was staged by Ulpadal Dutt in Calcutta. This was the Congress government in West Bengal at the time, who tried to sabotage this play. He was then arrested. Then this play was on the Naval Mutiny, and in 1966 he was arrested for staging this play. Of course, they gave all sorts of things. So I'm at heart, and from my family, a Congress person, because my family has been in Congress. But I wrote what I was reading and what I was studying. So there is a lot of criticism of congressmen here. I've also written the truth that I felt about Navy. So, you don't write books to make friends, So it's all right for these. Yeah.
There's a lot of patriotic films being made nowadays, but I don't know if somebody will pick up this, because it's quite a thrilling story and quite a compelling story. But let's not also forget, it's something that the government may not want to encourage too much of. So the pity will be that this will not reach the masses. But I thank you for letting me have the advanced manuscript so I can get a sense of what was happening, what's not around us. And one could say that the sailors were misguided, but in retrospect, you've got to admit, I sense that there's something very romantic about the whole thing. Pramod, your book is going to be a little expensive, so I think you should bring out cheaper editions. Again, I'm promoting the idea. So just say. But what a glorious book, and what wonderful photographs. This is what retelling of history should be about. If I'm effusive, it's only for one reason. As a man growing up, as a boy growing up in this city, I had heard about the Naval Mutiny, but it never showed up in my history books. And I'm glad that 75 years later, there is some mention of it in our public consciousness. Thank you very much, Pramod, for participating in my podcast, and thank you for writing this book. I do hope more and more people find out about this subject, and someday this becomes a part of our history books. So thank you once again.
Well, thank you, Sidharth, and thank you very much for your very generous endorsement. That not only encourages the a budding author, but also to people at large. You have a fairly large amount of following. So thank you very much for this and for giving me this opportunity to talk to you.
So that's all from me, Sidharth Bhatia, and the rest of the team here from IVM. With this podcast, we'll be back again next week with another guest. Till then, goodbye.
You can check out this podcast and other interesting ones on the Wire website, the IVM podcast website, app, or wherever else that you get your podcasts. Goodbye from me, Sidharth Bhatia, and the Wire Talks podcast team.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Think Fast, Namit Potnis, a good friend of mine, founder of Drumworks, joins Varun and Suchita. He talks about all things NFT and shares a few tips on investing. On Paisavaz, Anupam and Devina Mehra, founder at First Global, discuss the outlook for the Indian equity market in 2022. On the Filter Coffee podcast, Karthik talks to author Rachna Bisht about her book 1971 Charge of the Gorkhas. On all things policy, the Takshashila folk contemplate the need for Indian health services in current times. And on Say No to Drama, Chetna pulls down the curtain around nostalgia and teaches us how to live in the present. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Also, please do tell a friend. It really does help us when you spread the word about our podcast. And I'd also like to ask you if you could rate or recommend wherever you listen to our podcast. And speaking of where you listen to this show, if you're on an Android phone, do check out our new Android app. We have a brand new app with a brand new listening experience. Definitely check it out. I think you will enjoy it. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda and CoinSwitch Kuber. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Love fighting?
We've got you covered.
Check out our show, The Fighting Goat, where we, the voices of the internet, Arjun Chipalkatti and Somesh Kamra, bring to you crazy weekly action on your favorite combat show, The Fighting Goat.
Be it commentary, breakdown, predictions, analysis of styles and techniques.
And of course, your round of favorite fighters.
You can listen to us every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app, website, and all major podcast streaming platforms.